Let's get more political and military analysis from our opening panel tonight. From Washington, D.C., we have Behnam Ben Taleblu, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defensive Democracies. Joining us from New Jersey is Ryan Morrow, a national security analyst at the Clarion Project. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Behnam, let's cut to the chase here. Do you think the U.S. could be headed for a military confrontation with Iran?
Hi, Michelle. Great to be with you. No, I don't see this as an opportunity for the U.S. or a prospect for escalation in the military sense by the U.S. Against Iran. I think there needs to be a clearer chain of evidence put forth. And the story that continues to come out right now is that they were charges, not necessarily missiles or other kinds of strikes on these vessels that caused the explosion. So this is Iran trying to, if it is proven, of course, this would be Iran trying to mask its hand. And by masking its hand, the Iranians are giving the U.S. every incentive not to respond.
Ryan, even if neither side actually wants a war, how likely is it that this escalation and a series of misunderstandings and potential miscalculations could still lead to a serious military confrontation?
I don't think it's in anyone's interest for that to happen, even if the Iranian regime believes that it is in its interest to have some type of violence happen against the Saudis, against the UAE, because the Iranian regime, I think, is seeing its life flash before its eyes, because the reason it was so difficult for the United States to assemble this international coalition for sanctions for so long was partially because of the fear of a backlash economically, that there'd be a big price to pay. And now guess what? There are tough sanctions on Iran, and we're doing all right. And so the Iranian regime realized that that's very bad for them if the world learns the lesson that you can sanction Iran and punish the regime, and there aren't going to be severe economic consequences. So the regime has to do something to raise the price of oil, to raise the price of shipping, because you've got to have insurance for those vessels that are traveling through the maritime. And that's the play that they're making right now.
But Behnam, in terms of the military escalation, the U.S. has deployed warships to the region in recent days. It says it's needed to counter indications of threats from Iran. That was part of what Secretary of State Pompeo was breaking down for Brussels. What do we know about those threats? Do we have any more information about what those threats could be and the likelihood of them?
Well, Michelle, the U.S. or the U.S. media in this case has not provided any additional information about the nature of those threats, as well as the nature of the intelligence. As we know, some of it came from Israel, some of it the U.S. has confirmed about Iranian desires or Iranian intent to go after military and or diplomatic facilities in the Middle East in response to the restoration of sanctions at the one-year mark that the U.S. left the JCPOA. That being said, what we do know is that such threats, such proxy actions, such attempts to disguise one's own activities in the foreign and security policy realm are consistent with the past 40 years of Iranian bad behavior. The Islamic Republic knows it cannot win a head-to-head conventional military contest with the United States, or in fact many of the U.S.'s regional allies. And that's why we're likely to see this kind of similar, incremental, graduated escalation by regime proxies well below the threshold for the use of force, but just enough to cause irritation and just enough to get for the U.S. to double down, but not actually take any action. So I think we're about to see a new normal emerge in the Persian Gulf.
Ryan, can you quickly break down these military assets that the U.S. has now moved to the region?
Well, you have the aircraft carrier there and anti-missile systems that are being deployed there. And it's basically sending the signal to Iran that we can carry out airstrikes in a dramatic and quick fashion if need be, if our forces are attacked. And there was that quote that came out from the Revolutionary Guards official that said that they view the U.S. military forces there no longer as a threat, but as a target. And I'm used to a lot of threats coming from the Iranians, but that was oddly specific.
Right.
And so I would imagine that they feel some obligation to act upon that if they're going to be so bold.
All right, Ryan and Behnam, stay right there. We have a lot more to discuss.
We'll see what happens with Iran. If they do anything, it will be a very bad mistake. If they do anything, I'm hearing little stories about Iran. If they do anything, they will suffer greatly. We'll see what happens with Iran.
That's President Trump's warning to Iran. The president's comments coming after 4 ships were damaged over the weekend near the Persian Gulf. U.S. officials seem to be indicating that Iran or Iranian-backed proxies used explosives to blow large holes in the ships anchored off the coast of the United Arab Emirates. Let's bring back my panel for further discussion on this. Behnam Ben Taleblu, a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and Ryan Morrow, national security analyst at the Clearcut Project. Ryan, Iran is denying responsibility for these attacks on the oil tankers. Do you buy that? If not Iran, who is responsible for this?
No, I don't buy it. In fact, I think that Iran doesn't want to admit that they're responsible, but they kind of want us to know that they're responsible, which is a certain way of doing things when they operate through Hezbollah or the Houthi rebels, where everyone knows that they're responsible, but they're not going to outright claim it. But I think the danger that comes with that is the fact that the Saudis are going to want to show that they have an ability to deter Iran, that they're self-sufficient. And you have different leadership in Saudi Arabia today. I would expect the Saudis to respond in some way against the Iranians. And I'll tell you what, I also expect the Iranians to do more attacks through proxies or through cyber warfare, because that's what they've done in the past.
Ryan, what kind of Saudi response do you expect then?
It could be cyber attacks, since the Iranian regime has gone after Saudi oil production and tried to do some major damage to them in the past, and there wasn't much of a Saudi response. So from the Saudi perspective, they're going to want to do something to show that they can strike back on that level. There could be the Saudis using their own proxy forces within Iran or on the borders, and there might be some Wahhabist-type militants that they could support, as they've been alleged to do so in the past.
I mean, you do have those Iranian oil sanctions putting a squeeze on the economy, and then these oil tankers being hit in that region. So it does raise a lot of eyebrows. Behnam, Mike Pompeo has been urged by the European leaders to show maximum restraint towards Iran. He's being urged to show maximum restraint. That seems to be an explicit counterpoint to the U.S. call for maximum pressure on Tehran. What do you think is the right approach here?
Well, I think that would be a grave mistake. Right now, Tehran is looking to dilute the highly effective maximum pressure strategy against it. Its economy is in shambles. The regime leadership is divided. They don't know how to fully respond to this increased U.S. positioning in the region, to this toughening of American sanctions, and to the unilateral success of American sanctions compared to what it took 5 years, multilateral sanctions, to actually achieve when it comes to pressuring the Iranian economy. So this is Europe's attempt to get America to fall backwards into the deal and to bow before threats of Iranian escalation. I think the Secretary's trip was important, but not for that reason. Come July 7 or July 8, when the first 60-day window for Iranian nuclear escalation is over, should Iran commence its program any further, it would be violating the letter of the JCPOA nuclear deal. And that's when America and the EU need to act in a united fashion to restore UN sanctions and to develop a united Western pressure policy towards Tehran.
Do you see that happening, Behnam?
Europe is wrong.
But do you see that happening?
In the very short term, no, but there is a little bit of room for optimism here, which is on May 8th, the European response to Iran was quite strong, and they did not bow before Iran as they tend to normally do.
I like that optimistic approach. Ryan, look, the Trump administration says Iran just cannot get a nuclear bomb. Israel agrees, and they both feel that the nuclear deal was just paving the way for Iran to get that nuclear bomb, and at the same time putting it in a more favorable economic position, allowing it to continue to sponsor its terrorist proxies around the world. But given where we are now, do you think that the Trump administration is on the right path? Do you think that they do have the right strategy here with regards to Iran?
Overall, yes, although I would like to see some more ideological warfare. I'm concerned particularly about Iranian-linked proxies within the United States that the Clearcut Project has done a lot of work in researching. So there's a domestic element to this. But I also think that we need to prepare for the potential collapse of the Iranian regime, because we've seen in the Middle East how seemingly stable dictatorships can just collapse in the blink of an eye. And then here you look at the Iranian regime, where you have all the ingredients for a revolution. And I don't see indications for real concrete planning for if that happens, and trying to assemble some type of alternative government. And that's the responsible measure we need to take if we're going to sanction Iran as we are.
The administration insists that its goal is not regime change. That's a good point, though, Ryan. Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you so much. Ryan Morrow, always a pleasure to have you both.